My topic for today is, does maternal hyperandrogenemia and obesity lead to PCOS in the future generation? And really, this is the topic of today: old questions, new answers. And I'm going to bring you some of the latest evidence on this subject. Now, we all know that PCOS affects women of reproductive age, and the pathophysiology, though we've moved a long way from Stein-Leventhal describing it, we still haven't understood completely the pathophysiology. Recent evidence suggests that the intrauterine environment may be a key factor in the pathogenesis, and hyperexposure of the fetus to androgens has several effects. Animal studies and human data support this hypothesis. Now, the first concept is that PCOS is a heritable condition. It's familial in the majority of cases, but the exact genes are very difficult to identify, and so many genes have been proposed, then they have been eliminated also. And this is because there's a lot of ethnic and a lot of geographic heterogeneity. So there's a missing concept in heritability, and therefore the concept of an epigenetic phenomenon involving the hyperexposure of the fetus to androgens has been suggested. This is a lovely, concise table from Roy Hamburg and his team from the Homerton Hospital, UK, and it shows that PCOS etiology can be genetic, related to gene mutations, can be environmental, ethnicity, geographic, and also metabolic changes. And the epigenetic factors are placental alterations, fetal alterations, and alterations on the genetic material, which like DNA methylation, telomere shortening, which is occurring in the fetus. Now, when we look at prenatal exposure to androgens, hyperexposure of the female fetus in utero to testosterone has been shown to affect the expression of the genes which are concerned with several processes, including ovarian steroid production, insulin action, and GnRH pulsatility. So let's take a look at some of the animal studies. And animal studies have been done on the rhesus monkey and the sheep. They were subjected to androgens. When this was done, it was found that these animals developed endocrine and metabolic alterations similar to PCOS. They were found to have disordered ovarian function, impaired fertility, hypersecretion of LH and insulin resistance, and disordered folliculogenesis, which is the characteristic hallmark of PCOS. So it was Hart et al. In 2010 who said that the uterine environment could program the ovaries in the human at a very early stage. But the good thing is that there are many protective mechanisms in the human fetus, and the human fetus is protected from maternal androgens. And this is because there's a high concentration of plasma-binding proteins reducing the free levels of androgens. There's a high level of placental aromatase activity, and this placental P450 aromatase enzyme converts the androgens into estrogens. So then what is the missing link? Is there a change in the placenta in PCOS women? Is there a dysfunctional placenta? We don't know yet. So what we know is that maternal hyperandrogenemia affects the fetal ovary and the number of follicles. Mid-gestation fetal ovaries start producing enzymes which metabolize steroids, and this mid-gestation fetal ovaries produce androgens in vivo, leading to changes in AMH expression, increase in the number of follicles. Now, the Barker hypothesis has suggested this genetic programming in utero. An umbilical vein testosterone level in female infants born to mothers with testosterone is elevated. So they have got already elevated testosterone levels. Even second trimester amniotic fluid testosterone levels in PCOS patients have been studied, and that is elevated. So Hines et al. In 2002 said that when serum and amniotic fluid androgen concentrations were high in pregnancies with a female fetus. Preschool age girls, when they followed them up, behaved like boys with distinct masculine type behavioral traits. We just heard Dr. Pauline Markey, and I was thinking, even the link between PCOS and autism has now been established, and autism has been linked to fetal steroidogenic activity. These studies were done in Sweden and were done in Denmark when they looked at autistic children, and they found that they more often had mothers with PCOS. So they concluded that maternal PCOS increased the odds of autosomal spectrum disorders. And it was further increased when the mothers had obesity with PCOS. So the maternal environment and the placenta and the fetus is a complex relationship. And we know now that the placenta has certain features where the P450 aromatase activity, 3-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase activity is increased, and there are some changes which in these PCOS mothers, even the fetus changes, the genetic predisposition, the insulin hypersecretion, the androgens from the fetal ovary, the changes in the AMH expression, the KISS or the KISS system alterations, on the possible autism spectrum disorders, all these things are linked to the fetal and the maternal environment or the milieu, and the hormonal milieu in pregnancy is very, very important. And the overall effects are an increase in GDM, an increase in preeclampsia, increase in PIH, preterm delivery, miscarriages, hypoglycemia, and even perinatal death. When we look at insulin resistance, PCOS in pregnancy is associated with a greater risk of gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, PIH, preterm delivery, cesarean miscarriage, etc. When they looked at diabetic mothers with PCOS and diabetic mothers without PCOS, they found that diabetic mothers without PCOS do not seem to deliver PCOS daughters, but diabetic mothers with PCOS do have a higher incidence of PCOS daughters, suggesting that hyperinsulinemia plays a synergistic role with the androgens, but is not the main factor. But we all know how closely hyperinsulinemia and hyperandrogenemia are linked, and it is possible that these two factors together are causing this. And this is the thrifty hypothesis, which says that the impaired intrauterine nutritional environment causing IUGR is leading to insulin resistance in the offspring and then leading to metabolic syndrome later in life. So the hyperandrogenic intrauterine environment predisposes to insulin resistance in the offspring of PCOS mothers, eventually creating the metabolic features of PCOS, suggesting that fetal hyperexposure to androgens in utero plays a central role in the etiology of PCOS. AMH levels have been studied. They correlate with ovulatory function. Serum AMH has a strong predictive ability for amenorrhea. And Hart said that the maternal serum testosterone at 18 weeks gestations correlates with the serum AMH concentrations in adolescence, suggesting that an epigenetic phenomenon and hypomethylation of the AMH gene by testosterone is responsible. There's also the kispeptin system, which is a neuromodulator, which plays a crucial role in the maturation of the female reproductive axis. And this disturbed environment, hyperandrogenic environment, will have a direct influence on the ovaries. And the programming of the ovaries occurs very early. The selection of the number of oocytes and the follicles which will survive to puberty is arranged during the prenatal period. So a higher number of oocytes or follicles with more surrounding granulosa cells and finally higher AMH is the result of this hyperandrogenic environment. There's also the concept of the two-hit hypothesis by Brenner, who says that it's not just the changes in the endocrine milieu, it's also the early postnatal life, and which amplifies the reproductive and metabolic defects. And it's the prenatal, it's also the postnatal adiposity, it's also the nutritional status in childhood and the childhood obesity. Which brings me to this very positive point that showing PCOS is epigenetically modified and transmitted, it suggests reversibility. And that is why we can actually modify these hormone changes which occurred in utero and maybe prevent the disease. So what can we do? What can we do as clinicians? We can optimize pre-pregnancy health. We can create awareness among our patients. We encourage them to exercise a multidisciplinary team. We counsel the family. We have to dispel myths, eat for two, heavier the better. And really, if we are able to do that, we are passing healthy habits to future generations. If we change one woman, we will be affecting the next generation. And I think in my practice, at least, I've tried now to promote a concept of fitness rather than lose of weight. Promote a concept that fitness is a fun activity. Instead of having coffee with your friends, go for a walk or go for a picnic. And I'm very happy that last year we collaborated with the PCOS Society and the Mumbai Obstetric Gynec Society, and we brought out a video on fitness mantra, what is your fitness mantra, where we had our gynecologists come in with their photos and promote their fitness mantra. So as I conclude, I say, who is the culprit? Who is the bad apple in the lot? Is it the genetic susceptibility? Is it the intrauterine environment? Or is it the postnatal factors? And really, it's everything. So PCOS is common in reproductive age women. Pathophysiology is still not completely understood. The intrauterine environment we know now is a key factor, and hyperexposure of the fetus to androgens is very, very relevant. High concentrations of this maternal serum testosterone in pregnancy will influence behavior during childhood, autism, AMH concentrations in adolescent, long-term insulin resistance, and long-term metabolic syndrome. And reprogramming of the female reproductive axis in utero leads to this ovulation dysfunction, insulin resistance, hyperandrogenism, and PCOS. With that, I thank you all for a patient hearing, and I'm really very thankful to be part of this PCOS conference.